Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner and today is June 21st, 2017, the first day of summer. Hope you're having fun in your summer plans that you're doing out there. I think you might like the weather in the next few days if you're looking for calmer and quieter conditions across much of the state. All right, now just taking a quick peek at some concerns for fire danger. You should be most aware across the eastern border along the Yukon. Especially we have some extreme danger here marked in the darker red colors, but there's also still some fire danger across the Nulato Hills area out there towards the Seward Peninsula. So if you have outdoor activities, make sure that you're putting out those fires and not letting them burn when you're not in your presence. Okay, let's take a look at the weather systems that I was talking about just a moment ago. That's going to be a little bit quieter, mainly because of this ridge that's building across the western areas of the state and actually weak ridging building across the southern areas of the state. Now the last few days we've had a low pressure system that's been circulating across the southern areas of the Gulf, and this low pressure system is really starting to lose its spin, and a matter of fact we're going to see a reverse of the weather systems fairly quickly on Thursday. So just putting this into motion one more time, you can see the low pressure system that moved across the northwest coast yesterday is exiting off to the northeast, and behind this system we have another low pressure system that's moving up from the North Pacific, and a weak disturbance bringing this very warm high cloud tops there across much of the Bering. However, that's producing just a little bit of showers out there, and for Shemya, you can see the plume of moisture just kind of edging in but not making much eastward progress. So let's go on to your surface maps for today. We'll stay on the system out here to the west. Here's the surface low that is moving up. It's a 995 millibar low, pushing another warm system up into the southern areas of the Bering. Across the Bering, here's the ridge, a 1030 millibar ridge centered just to the southeast of the Pribilof Islands. And then across the Gulf waters, we have low pressure, which has been weakening, and that's kind of centered along the eastern waters with a little bit of a trough extension out there towards Kodiak Island. Across inland locations, a very weak feature in between these systems, primarily ridging, so that's why we're seeing these clearing skies from the northern areas of the state, from the eastern Brooks Range all the way back down towards the Kuskokwim Delta region and Bristol Bay. Across the northwest coast, we did see some breaks just along the Kotzebue Sound there, and then primarily just cloud cover and clouds just moving across the Brooks Range this afternoon. During the afternoon hours, we did see some thunderstorm development across and along the eastern Alaska Range there, with some activity extending just slightly north and some isolated thunderstorms as well across the eastern Brooks Range. That activity is kind of tapering off now. Low pressure across the Gulf is not bringing much showers this afternoon to the southeast. That's kind of tapered off a little bit. Overall, the rain amounts for the last 24 hours has been between 1 to 3/10 of an inch, with the highest amounts again across the eastern areas of the Alaska Range, the higher elevations to the north of those locations. And then let's take a look at the forecast for tonight. Looks a little bit wet on this map, but primarily just kind of outlining where you can see any showers develop overnight. We do have a weak disturbance riding up ahead along the northwest coast, and that's going to be enough to produce some shower activity and some patchy fog as well overnight in that region. For the southeast, we have low pressure that's continuing to weaken. However, a few showers will be possible in the overnight hours as well as much of south central. For south central locations, we might see an isolated thunderstorm this evening. However, as we continue, this ridge is going to dry things out, so I think we're going to be on the quiet side of rain activity tonight. Now across the Bering, expect some patchy fog across much the waters out here, moving into the Bristol Bay area. So from Bethel on down towards Dillingham, might see some fog sneak in during the overnight hours. Now along the western areas of the Bering, there's that low pressure system begins to weaken, but the rain activity will still continue across the western Aleutians there through your Thursday. Now that low pressure, as it's going to keep its momentum, it's just some more energy just continuing that low pressure system, but it's not making much progress as that ridge is going to stay across the eastern waters through your Thursday forecast. Across the state, it's going to be the driest day of the week statewide, as we see a shift of a pattern with high pressure becoming the dominant pressure system across the Gulf waters. That means we're going to see a bit of clearing across the Gulf and all the way back towards Kodiak, and a weak boundary across the western Alaska Range down to the Aleutian Range will give some afternoon showers, and we'll also see some afternoon showers across the rest of the Alaska Range with isolated thunderstorms for the Talkeetna Mountains over to the eastern range and just to the north of this area. Now across the northern areas of the state, it's going to be a little bit drier. Weak, very weak low pressure, no winds and no boundaries. It's going to be a fairly calm day, except the northwest coast is going to be seeing some winds across Kotzebue around 35 miles per hour to 40 miles per hour. Wind speeds between 20 to 30 miles per hour for the rest of the northwest coast. Now, as we head into your Friday, we're going to have another low pressure system moving up towards the Gulf. That's going to inch just to the southern areas of the Gulf on Friday, and this system is not terribly strong on Friday at 1014 millibar. Low feature is going to have some rain just moving into the southern waters. It's going to move on an easterly track heading towards the southeast for the upcoming weekend. But ahead of this system, there's going to be a great break in the clouds across all of the coastal areas back through Kodiak. And then across inland areas, still keeping those clouds with low pressure, starting to bring the cloud cover back into the south. So a little bit of a break on Thursday with clouds continuing into Friday. Very warm temperatures are expected across much of the state for your Thursday and Friday, with temperatures between 60 and 70 degrees. The highest temperatures are going to be peaking in the upper 70s across much of the interior. Now the north and northwest coast will see fairly quiet conditions, a little bit gustier, continuing across the northwest coast towards the Kotzebue Sound there. Across the Bering, continued quiet conditions as ridging is still dominating through the end of the week across the eastern waters. Expect this ridge starting to break down as low pressure from the subtropics is going to be pushing energy, which actually gets the warm front a little bit further into the central areas of the Bering. However, these are just going to be light showers at this point, as this first low pressure system runs out well ahead of the upper level low system that still remains to the south. Now across the southeast, remember, you are going to still see those quiet conditions on Friday, so enjoy the end of your week, as the weekend you might get a little bit wet again. So for the temperatures across the southeast and all the way back through the Gulf, we saw temperatures ranging around 55 degrees just above or just under for most locations, with 60 degrees just inland up towards Skagway and back towards the Copper River. Saw temperatures peaking this afternoon, and temperatures were warmest across the central areas of the state, with Eagle seeing a high of 76 degrees this afternoon. The coldest this morning was Barrow, with temperatures warming up quite a bit from Nooksook all the way over to Dead Horse. We saw temperatures in the mid 60s, so quite a good warm up with a south to westerly flow across the Brooks Range there. Across the northwest coast, saw temperatures actually climbing up into the mid 40s. So warm for them, and for the western areas of the state, kind of modified around the coastal areas in the upper 40s, with the southwest seeing temperatures ranging between 55 to 65 degrees this afternoon. Now the Alaska Peninsula also in the mid 50s, and the Aleutian chain ranged from the lower 40s 40s to the lower 50s. For temperatures overnight, expect the warmest temperatures again across the north interior areas of the state in the mid-50s. Generally, temperatures are going to range between 45 to 50 degrees statewide, with the coldest temperatures just in the mid-30s across the northern coast. Now, as we go into your Thursday, will heat up very quickly across the interior into the mid-70s. So a nice day on Thursday if you like warm temperatures. And temperatures along the coastal areas will be between 60 to 65 degrees, maybe slightly cooler with the low pressure still kind of breaking up around the Gulf. The northern tier of the state will see temperatures in the 40s once again, mid-40s, and mainly in the upper 40s to near 50 for the Bering and surrounding islands there. Now, your flying weather for tomorrow is going to be VFR for most of the state. As we head into the morning hours, expect the main problems along the coastal areas, MVFR to IFR, and especially across the Bering waters. We'll still see a few MVFR conditions, however, spotty across much of the Gulf waters, with conditions improving during the afternoon. Now, thunderstorms are developing for the afternoon hours, so that may temporarily reduce visibilities and the heavier showers. Now your passes in more depth is Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass are going to both be VFR. As you're going to see, all the inland locations be VFR pretty much, like Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, VFR all day at Rainy Pass, VFR for Windy, and VFR for Isabel Pass, as well as Mentasta. Watch out for thunderstorms there developing in the afternoon. And then we'll see Tanita go to VFR all day, and Portage will also be VFR. Looking at Chilkoot and White Pass, also a VFR day. So great flying weather if you're looking for visual flight rules. And now that your freezing levels are going to be pretty much 6,000 to 8,000 feet across the state and the Bering. Slightly higher heights just to the south of the chain, and a little bit cooler towards the central and eastern area of the chain, so 4,000 to 6,000 feet increase across the central areas of the Bering. Now, the icing concerns tomorrow will be only across the western areas of the Aleutians, and that'll be above 6,000 feet. For your jet stream tomorrow, we're seeing the pattern have a little bit more amplification across the Gulf. However, these are slow-moving systems as this ridge is going to stay right along the Aleutian chain. A little bit of a jet streak there coming into the western Aleutians at 110 knots. A wavy pattern with the polar jet very weak just on the northern tier of the state. Now, the 9,000-foot winds are kind of not matched as we have very weak systems at towards the surface. Low pressure, here it is moving up towards Kodiak Island. And then here's the weak flow pattern across the state, not driving a whole lot there. A southwesterly flow between 15 to 20 knots across the state, with the strongest winds there across the northwest at 45 knots. And then the Gulf will see more of an easterly flow pattern on the south side of that ridge, and offshore pattern for much of the southeast. Looking at your 3,000-foot winds, very similar pattern, a little bit weaker flow, 5 to 10 knots across the state, and 30 to 40 knots on the northwest sector. Looking at the Bering, of course, the low pressure in the west is going to have a little bit change of a direction around the western Aleutians, with a relatively light flow at 3,000 feet, 15 to 25 knots across the Bering. Looking at your turbulence, to sum this all up, you're primarily looking at the turbulence across a weak jet across the northwest below 4,000, and then also below 5,000 across the western areas of the Aleutians. Also, keep in mind there's always gusty conditions that develop around thunderstorms, so look for those conditions mainly around the Alaska Range tomorrow and just north of this location. For the southeast, it looks like you're going to have a fairly quiet day for winds tomorrow, so if you can get out there and enjoy the light conditions, it's going to be the perfect day. Now, in just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
It's important for us as pilots to recognize that there's a very delicate balance that exists in our recreation or our field of career or whatever else it may be. Are there some professional pilots in the crowd, or pretty well all general aviation? Is there a mix? Who flies for a living? Couple? Anybody fly helicopters? Anybody a rotary wing pilot? Joel? Huh? Sit up front so I don't have to talk loud. Okay? Yeah. Now, I hate to make jokes about helicopter pilots. They have enough trouble, don't they? All those moving parts. Holy cow. Now, when I talk about the delicate balance that exists here, what I mean is you have a specific reason to go flying. That's the mission, if you would. There's a certain airplane that you're going to use. That's the machinery involved that you're going to use. It must fit the job, okay? 2 people in a 2-seat airplane. That fits the job, right? This used to be a big thing with agriculture spraying, crop spraying. If they're using the right machinery, it works pretty well. Super Cubs with wire cutters and so on aren't really the best way to go. Further to that, the aircraft must be in the proper environment, and the simplest example of that would be a VFR-equipped aircraft with respect to instruments and radios in an IFR environment. It is just not going to work. Now, further to that, the pilot. By statistics, they're going to say that's the weak part of the equation, if you would, because the majority of aircraft accidents are pilot error. Now, we don't use that term anymore. They got more sophisticated, and we say things like the pilot failed too, or whatever else. I don't like that particularly, because if you turn the scenario around, we'll find that 100% of the flights that ended successfully also had a pilot on board. So the accident investor may say that the pilot is the weakness in the equation. I say it's a strength, because you have the responsibility and the authority that goes with it to say, this aircraft does not fit this environment, or I don't fit the environment with that aircraft or any combination thereof. You have to do that, okay? Now, I'm not going to talk about this anymore, because I think if you keep a picture of this in the back of your mind, that a lot of what I talk about a little later here will make a bit more sense. We have a poster that says that a superior pilot is one that uses superior judgment, blah, blah, blah. Again, you get the feeling that I don't necessarily need to have skill as well, but you do, okay? And I'll just make that point one more time, and that's the last time that I'll mention it. I have about 5 slides that define pilot judgment. There's probably as many definitions of judgment as there are people in this room. We think of it as common sense or horse sense or whatever else. All of those things are difficult to define. But I think that this one probably fits us as pilots better than any other that I've seen, so that's what I'm going to use. Pilot judgment is a process that infers that there's some action taking place of recognizing all available information, emphasis on the word all, about those 3 things I just mentioned in the equation. The aircraft, ourselves, and the environment in which we're operating. Okay, you need to know everything you possibly can about those, followed by the rational evaluation of alternatives. Now, emphasis on the plural there, alternatives. That's to implement timely decisions, which is also very important, that will maximize safety. Now, that's quite a mouthful, all right? But there's 3 very important things to remember there. That we have a rational evaluation of alternatives, timely decision making, and maximum safety, not just come up with some sort of a decision based on a wild guess that might work sometimes. That just isn't good enough. So we're going to aim for the bullseye all the time. Pilot decision making, judgment, if you would, thus involves one's attitude towards risk taking. Attitude is a very, very important thing, and we're going to talk about attitudes as well this evening as we go. And more importantly, it's that pilot's ability to make decisions, and those decisions are based upon your level of knowledge, of skill, and of experience. Those 3 famous things, if you would. Now, again, like judgment, these are like 3 separate bank accounts. You can't trade one for the other. You have to maintain a healthy balance in each one, all right? Most accidents, now here I am, it seems like I'm dwelling on the negative, but that's the hard evidence. When an aircraft accident occurs, very seldom do we find that it was a lack of skill, okay? Most often pilots have the level of skill required. Knowledge may have been a little bit weak, or probably the combination of machine and environment wasn't just quite right. But you do have to maintain a balance. You can't trade one for the other. The person that's extremely skillful with the aircraft that doesn't understand the airspace structure or air traffic control clearances is not a complete professional pilot. Okay? And we are all supposed to be professionals.
Welcome back to the show, and now on to your marine forecast. We're going to talk about the sea ice across the northwestern coast here. You can see that it's rapidly decreasing along the coastline. So just some very light ice out there in Kotzebue Sound, but the forecast is in couple weeks it's going to all be gone. Now across the coast of Russia here, we're also seeing the ice edge begin to deteriorate, and very quickly this is going to start moving off the coast, and we already are seeing some leads across the northwest here, kind of creeping up towards Barrow. This lead is going to continue to develop, and we'll see those breaks in the ice very quickly as we head further into summer. Now let's talk about the southeast marines for your Thursday forecast. And here it is. It's 10 to 15 knots across the area, and we're going to see seas between 2 to 5 feet, the highest seas across the outer waters, and primarily a south to westerly direction for most of the locations. Now as we head into your Friday, a little bit stronger winds across those inner channels between 10 to 20 knots, and we'll see more of a northerly flow across the northern Lynn Canal, and as you head towards the Clarence Strait, a little bit change of wind directions there. Across the outer waters, primarily a north to westerly flow, with seas on this day between 4 to 5 feet, again, highest seas across the outer waters. Now the south central western Gulf locations will see light flow for your Thursday, with a little bit stronger flow there through Shelikof Strait, the Barren Islands, but 15 knots out of the west to south direction is going to be changing through the day, and we'll see seas on that day between 2 to 4 feet. A little bit of a change of wind direction on Friday as we have low pressure moving up from the south. We'll get a little bit of a northeasterly flow ahead of that low pressure system. Otherwise, fairly light winds around 10 knots, variable wind directions along the Prince William Sound and northern Gulf, with seas between 3 to 5 feet for most locations, a little bit higher towards Kodiak Island, around 7 feet with that system moving up. Now on your Thursday forecast for the Alaska Peninsula, we're expecting very similar conditions, and we'll see a little bit more of a southwesterly push across Bristol Bay, and seas on that day will be between 2 to 4 feet. With your Friday forecast, a little bit stronger wind flow as well near Kodiak Island out of the northeast direction. But otherwise, it's going to be light flow, 2 to 5 foot seas, a little bit higher seas there towards Kodiak at 7 feet. And Thursday, your forecast is going to be some of your stronger winds out there towards the western Aleutians, gales from the central to western Aleutians at 35 knots, with lighter wind speeds towards the eastern Aleutians out of the south to southeasterly directions across the area, lighter speeds for Dutch Harbor and surrounding waters. And then on Friday, a little bit change of wind direction there. East to south direction is the primary directions, with small crafts across much of the area, 25 to 30 knots, and then seas will go down across the western Aleutians from 16 to 10 on your Friday, and pretty much 6 to 9 feet across all of the central and eastern Aleutians. Looking at your west coast forecast, very similar conditions at 15 to 20 knots across the area. Small craft though as you head up there into the northern areas of the Bering, with gustier conditions as you head up towards the strait. Now seas on that day will be between 3 to 6 feet, and then we'll see a little bit of a change of wind direction across the Pribilof Islands and north, with a southeasterly flow. A flow a little bit confusing across the coast here, as we do still have that ridging that's working into the coast, and then we get a southerly direction behind that ridge, pushing in with the next low pressure that's coming up. primarily 15 to 25 knots again on that day, a little bit stronger winds across much of the area. Now the north and northwest coast will see around 20 to 30 knots with the strongest winds back here towards the northwest and across Kotzebue Sound. And looking at your seas on this day, 6 to 7 feet, changing slightly on Friday. Still seeing 6 to 8 feet with the stronger winds there for Kotzebue Sound on Friday. And the change of direction for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast looks like it's going to be more of a southeasterly direction there. Now let's go ahead and recap your forecast for tonight. We'll see some isolated thunderstorm activity across the eastern Brooks Range, possibly across the Talkeetnas. However, we're going to see a drying trend through much of the state with some shower activity possible as low pressure just off the northwest coast is going to send some energy off to the northeast. Now the southeast is going to be seeing very weak activity around the low pressure system that is diminishing just off the coast there. So there is still a possible chance for some isolated shower activity. And then across the eastern areas of the Bering and north, expect fog to develop and creep in, possibly to Bristol Bay. And then coastal areas of the Kuskokwim Delta on up through the Seward Peninsula. So foggy conditions across the west coast and rain moving or continuing to move across the western area of the Aleutians. Otherwise, the Bering is going to stay mostly dry through your Thursday as ridge dominates much of the water. Now, scattered shower activity is going to be on the decline for your Thursday, the driest day of the week, and it's also going to warm up into the 60s and 70s. Coastal areas across the north, however, will be in the mid-40s. Looking at your forecast on Friday, the next system to watch out for is going to be moving up to the southern Gulf, however, staying out of the northern coastal communities through your until your weekend. Across the northern tier of the state, rather dry with some isolated afternoon thunderstorms once again, and your low pressure system across the Bering is going to be losing some momentum. Thanks for staying with us tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.